Hello, Aaron Kubitz, personal trainer, Functional Aesthetics EC, helping average guys perform better inside and outside the gym. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a push-pull sort of split combined with some arms. So we're going to be doing the back, chest and back, shoulders, and then finishing it off with some arms work. Now there's going to be a slight twist to this because I'm going to be combining both free weight exercises and body weight or calisthenics exercises, if you like, in the course of this workout. Also going to be doing a little bit of power training as well, which is something that I like to do in my hybrid style of training. So typically people, when they're thinking about a hybrid athlete, they're thinking about guys who like to go out there and do some powerlifting stuff and then also do some long distance running or maybe some cycling, right? And I also like to do those kind of things, but when I'm talking about hybrid, I'm talking about hybrid strength training, meaning that you're blending both powerlifting, bodybuilding, and then also more athletic style of training, so power type training, right? And then you might mix into the put into the mix there some body weight exercises as well. And I'll get into the reasoning for the body weight exercises versus the free weight exercises a little bit later on in the video. Alright, first off, now as I repeatedly have said in my previous videos, and this should be relatively common knowledge, is you always start off your workouts with the most taxing exercises, which are typically your compound movements and your multi-joint movements. So compound movement would be like your bench press, your squat, your deadlift, and then multi-joint movements would be things like barbell rows, and like, let's say you're doing like a Romanian deadlift or something like that, right? Or in the multi-joint movement would be where you're, like a pull-up could also be like a multi-joint movement, right? Because you're using both the elbow joint, right? And you're also acting at the shoulder as well, versus with a barbell curl where you're primarily just working at the elbow joint. Now to initiate the curl, you are using a little bit of the anterior deltoids to do that. However, it is primarily a biceps exercise, and that's kind of the difference between the isolation exercise and a multi-joint movement exercise. So as I said at the beginning of this clip, that you want to be focusing on those compound movements because those are going to give you the most bang for your buck in building more just overall strength and size. And then the isolation exercises help to add more volume. Both are important to increasing, to building more muscle over time, right? So if you're trying to build more strength, you also probably want to lay a foundation or even alternate back and forth between a hypertrophy focus or muscle building focus in the beginning stages, maybe even endurance focus in the beginning stages. You're working on body weight exercises. Maybe you're doing like 2 to 3 sets of 10 to 20 reps in the beginning stages with a little bit lighter loads, right? To become more familiar with the exercises, to build up that tendon and ligament strength, and then maybe you're focusing then on a hypertrophy stage where you're trying to build more muscle. So you increase the load slightly, the reps come down slightly, but you're still trying to increase that overall volume, which is important to building more muscle, right? Now, once you've done that, the strength, building more strength is primarily a focus of lower rep ranges, right? So anywhere between like 1 to maybe 8 repetitions per set is where you're traditionally focused on when you're trying to build maximal strength, right? With that being said, after you've done that, you can also, if you're still trying to increase muscle mass as well, at the same time you're building your strength, focus on hitting as quickly as possible, getting up to those heavy lifts, right? And then at the end, if you still have more energy and your goal is to increase muscle mass, then what you want to do is focus on those multi-joint movements, right? They require a little less energy, right? You have a little energy left in the tank, not as much as you did at the beginning of the workout, but you still got a little left to burn. And then you also, so after you've done those multi-joint movements, maybe then go and do some isolation movements, particularly if you're at a more advanced stage in your training where it takes more stimulus, more exercise to provide the same training effect. Okay, so when you're selecting those multi-joint and isolation exercises to go along with your compound movements, the ones that you want to do are muscles that are already being used, whether in a supporting role or like a stabilization role or assistive role to the prime movers in that exercise, right? So for example, if you are doing a bent over barbell row, which would be a multi-joint movement, right? And then you want to figure out what I'm going to do with my isolation movement, right? Well, a good one to do with that is to work the biceps, right? Because when you're doing a row, you're working your back, but you're also using your biceps and your forearms to a certain degree as well. So when you get done and you have a little less energy left, then you can go down and do those a little bit easier exercises, which would be the biceps curls, right? The thing you could also do is if you're doing pull-ups, right? You could do curls after you get done with your pull-ups, right? Do some weighted pull-ups and then drop down and do some preacher curls or something, right? Do some hammer curls because the hammer curl, actually for a pronated grip when you're doing your pull-up, right? You're actually using those muscles on the top of the forearm the same as you would with a hammer curl. So it'd be a good crossover like that. And then the same thing goes for if you're doing like pressing movements, right? The pressing movements are going to also be using your triceps, not only with your chest and the bench press and also to the shoulders, you're also going to be using the triceps as well. So you could be doing something like regular bench press, close grip bench press, finish it with some skull crushers, right? Now at some point, your workouts are going to become extremely long if you're throwing all this in there. Also, if you don't have a lot of time to train, a better strategy would be hit certain compound movements one day and then have like separate day for arm training and accessory work. Okay, so when it comes to training the back, many people use the back training as a way to improve their posture. And this is not wrong. However, what typically happens is that they'll be saying that they'll be doing pull-ups, right? Because they'll be like, well, I'm working my back because I'm using pull-ups, right? The problem with that is that when you're doing a pull-up, yes, that's your vertical pull exercise, right? And if you go back to the primal movement patterns, right? You have your push, pull, hinge, you have your lunge, you have your squat, and then you have, with the pushing and pulling, you have horizontal pushing and pulling, vertical pushing and pulling, and the pull-up would classify as that vertical pulling movement. But the problem is that the lat muscles, which are the prime mover in a pull-up, is that their function is to extend the shoulder, right? So you're extending your arms like this. Also, to internally rotate it. So if you're trying to improve your posture and you're just focusing on your pull-ups and stuff, you might in fact actually worsen your posture by strictly just focusing on pull-ups. So you also want to work in that horizontal plane. But the horizontal plane is not enough, right? So when you're horizontal plane, you may be doing inverted rows, you're doing seated cable rows, maybe doing bent over barbell rows, different exercises like that, right? And all these different exercises are going to help you to strengthen the rhomboids to pull you back this way, almost in that transverse plane, right? Now, obviously, sagittal plane is going this way, and you're kind of moving yourself back that way, and the exercise is actually moving this way. When we think about the action of the rhomboids, they're actually pulling this way, almost in a wraparound fashion, so you're actually working kind of in that transverse plane that way. But the most often overlooked exercise, until of course Jeff Cavalier with Athlete X talking about a lot of this stuff, is the lower trapezius, right? And the lower trapezius is the so you have your upper traps, right, coming up here, right? And this is the part that a lot of guys, they want to emphasize and they want to train. However, if you're doing like a lot of, Olympic lifts, if you're doing cleans and stuff like that, if you're doing farmer's carries, oftentimes you don't actually need to do a lot of direct upper traps work. And oftentimes people have very tight upper traps. And so particularly, you know, if you're sitting a lot and stuff and you tend to hunch over this way, those muscles tend to become weak. These muscles in the front tend to become shorter and tighter, and then you start having those problems. So what you want to do is focus on the bottom of that diamond, because the trapezius muscle runs down to the top of the shoulder blades and then down to about the middle of the back in a diamond shape. So you have the middle trapezius fibers, which assist the rhomboids in squeezing the shoulder blades together, and then you have the lower trapezius fibers, which help to extend the thoracic spine, right? So your upper back helps to extend that. Your thoracic spine is about the middle of the back up to the base of the neck, right? And so if you want to strengthen that, some good exercises are bent over Y raises, right? Also doing scapular pull-ups. So if you're hanging to the pull-up bar and you're doing reverse shrugs like this, that's going to also help to strengthen the lower trapezius muscle. And that's why if you're doing a pull-up, the first thing you should be doing is, at the beginning of the pull-up, is to initiate that downward depression of the scapula, and then drive the elbows down, and that's going to actually help you to incorporate a little bit of your upper back into the equation, so that it's helping to bear the load in addition to the biceps, the forearms, and of course your lats. One more thing on working the upper trapezius. I would be remiss if I left out the front squat. I actually believe that the front squat is, while the back squat sometimes allows you to move more weight, the front squat is actually a very good exercise for athletic performance. In fact, even if you think about it on a football field, if you're coming off the line and you're pushing into somebody, right? It's very similar to the movement that you're doing there. If you're lifting a rock off the ground or something, or a log or a heavy bag, that's typically where you have the weight. You have it out in front of you, typically not on your back, right? Now you can get it on your back. You could tip that log over, move it on your back like this, walk greater distances. So it's not to say that the back squat or the front squat, one is better than the other, but I do think you should incorporate both of them. And one of the, a great benefit of doing the front squat is that by keeping those elbows up, and when you come down to the bottom, it really focuses on, you really have to exercise that lower trapezius muscle to prevent your upper back from folding forward, right? And then also, it's a great core exercise too. If you've ever done really heavy front squats, you can really feel your abs brace, particularly the transverse abdominis, which are underneath your six-pack muscles and underneath your internal and external obliques, and that really focused to cinch in tight around the spine. It's a natural weight belt. So if you're looking for a way to kind of increase that, strengthen that belly, and create that old school bodybuilder look of the vacuumed in core, right? Front squats might be a good exercise to do. Now the one caveat to that is, when you are lifting a lot of heavy weight and stuff like that, it can thicken the core muscles, and this is why a lot of times strongmen and stuff will have thicker cores, and that's a good thing. It's an adaptation because they're moving such heavy amount of weight, and so the body adapts to protect the spine, because that's actually the primary purpose of your core musculature, everything from the pelvis to the bottom of your neck, is to provide a stable base of support from which the limbs can then move and do other things, right? And so if you're moving really heavy objects all the time, the adaptation is going to be thicken up the midsection, right? And that's why guys like Vince Garanda, he was an old school bodybuilding coach, and he would tell his bodybuilders and stuff, he'd actually kick you out of the gym if he saw you doing crunches, especially weighted crunches, because he didn't want, because he thought it would create an unaesthetic look, right? That they wouldn't have a small, thin waist. And so instead they do exercises like vacuum exercises, where they bend over a chair or something like that, and you breathe your belly out, and then breathe it all the way, exhale it all the way out. And in that exhaled position, you just hold that position for as long as you could, and then maybe repeat that for 2 to 3 sets of 10 reps on that. And that would help them to strengthen the core, but also make it smaller, so that it really creates that offset between your massive upper body, the legs, and then you have this tiny little waist. Okay, so earlier on in this video, I had talked about how sometimes I like to pair power exercises with my strength exercises, right? And create that kind of hybrid strength feel. So you're working both the strength movement and the power or acceleration component of the exercise, right? And so when you're doing that, you also want to be thinking, like earlier in the video, also when I was talking about which exercises do you select to go with your compound movements, right? Whether it's a multi-joint movement or isolation exercise, well, you want to select exercises that work similar muscle groups that were worked in the more integrated exercise, which is the compound movement, because the compound movement, you're working multiple muscles all at once. Well, but these compound exercises, they typically have a predominant focus, right? So like a bench press is working a lot of different muscles. Maybe it's working your lats to a certain degree, or it's working your serratus muscles to a certain degree. You're working your glutes a little bit to squeeze your butt and arch your back and all that kind of stuff. But the prime movers in the bench press are going to be the shoulders, the chest, and the triceps, right? And so when you're combining something with that, you'd want to do like a triceps exercise for your isolation movement, right? Or a close grip bench press to emphasize the triceps a little bit more than, say, the chest, right? After you've got done doing your regular bench presses where you're using all three of the muscle groups. So the same thing goes for when you're pairing your power exercises. If you're doing a pulling movement for a multi-joint movement, or if you're doing a deadlift for your compound movement, doing something like a barbell clean, doing something like throwing a sandbag over your head or something like that, or a one-arm dumbbell snatch, as you see me doing here in the video, is a good way to have that crossover effect. So you're training the same muscle groups in reality, but you're training them in a little bit different fashion. So the one, it's just focused on move as much weight as possible. The other one, you're trying to focus on how fast can you move the weight. And it just helps to give you a more broad, full spectrum level of fitness versus just being really strong or having a lot of muscle, but you can also use it because in most sports, power is more important than strength. Yes, you do need to be strong, but at a certain point, having more strength is not going to make you a better athlete, right? Unless that is your sport. If you are a power lifter or a strongman, the stronger you can be, the better. You also, in those sports, though, might even want to train your cardiovascular system to a certain degree to help you not fatigue later on the portion in the workout. And actually, there's a guy, Greg Knuckles, powerlifting guy and stuff, and he had a great article on that, how not including cardiovascular exercise in your powerlifting routines can potentially detract from your overall performance in the sport of powerlifting. But with that being said, most sports require power production is more important than absolute strength. And so that's why you also want to be working on the power. And they also did some studies too that, you know, most people know by now that strength training is a great way to increase longevity. But what they also found is that power training, or the ability to be agile and move quickly, was even more or an even greater indicator of how long somebody was going to live than just absolute strength. So when it comes to free weight versus body weight exercise, obviously body weight exercise, there's some guys that can do some pretty impressive feats of strength. And in my opinion, I think actually that body weight exercises for the average person are probably the better option to do, right? I actually am not a master of calisthenics or gymnastics by any means, but I do see the value in doing them. And the reason being is that when you're doing body weight exercises, you have to use more muscles than just the prime mover in that exercise. So for example, if you're doing a push-up versus when you're doing a bench press, right? When you're doing a bench press, like as I talked about before, you are using your chest, you're using your shoulders, triceps, you're using your glutes to a certain degree, right? And a couple other muscles, right? Now, when you're doing the push-up though, you're using all those same muscles, but you're also doing like a plank. So you're having to use your abs at the same time to keep your back stiff, keep your body rigid. You're also, as you keep on going longer into a set of push-ups, you also probably notice that your quads, or the front of the legs here and stuff, they also will get a little bit of a workout as well. Even your glutes and stuff, trying to keep the body rigid. And so it is truly an integral full body exercise. And the more advanced your calisthenics or body weight exercises become, the more apparent this will become. In fact, I am still trying to verify this and research all this stuff, but there is a guy, Go Free Verity Scott. He has some excellent training information on both Quora and YouTube and stuff, and I read a lot of his articles and everything. And he was actually talking about how the pull-up actually activates the abdominal muscles and the core musculature almost more than any other abdominal exercise you can do. Now, I think the only one that was more than that was doing an ab rollout, especially doing an ab rollout from like a standing position. But otherwise, it's better than planks, it's better than crunches, sit-ups, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people, they like to do these challenges where they do like, how many push-ups can you do and stuff, and do like 100 push-ups every day for the troops, or 20 push-ups a day, whatever it is, or see how long we can do a plank for, right? And the thing is, if you can do a plank for, a minute or more, I mean, what's the point in keep on doing the plank, right? A push-up, you're already doing the plank, plus you're working the other muscles as well and getting those stronger. Same thing with a pull-up. You're working the lats, you're working the back, you're working the biceps, all that kind of stuff, and you're getting the abs in there to boot, and probably doing it better than you are with a plank. So that's another benefit of doing the body weight exercises. If you're doing, say, like the human flag or something, right? You're using your lats, you're using obliques, butt muscles, you're using your shoulders to push off of and everything. And so all these different muscles have to work together to create the movement, which makes it a more athletic movement versus when you're just doing something, exercises in a machine, and maybe it makes the muscles look good, but they're not necessarily entirely functional and transferable to athletic performance or everyday life. And that's why I think for the average person, a calisthenics routine, body weight exercises are a better choice than, say, doing powerlifting and bodybuilding routines. And the other thing is, too, you don't need a lot of equipment to do them, and you can do them just about anywhere you are. So if you're on the road traveling and stuff, you don't have to worry about if you have access to a gym, you can do your exercises and do it that way. With that being said, if you are trying to build maximal amounts of strength, if you are going to play competitive team sport like football or something that requires massive amounts of strength and pushing up against big heavy bodies and stuff, and not necessarily the ability to move yourself extremely fast in any particular way and doing flips and all this kind of stuff, or climbing up stuff, right? As many people might want to do, is climb up stuff and crawl through stuff and everything. If you're crawling around your attic at home or something, or you're playing a sport, or you're running around with the kids or something, right? But if you are trying to become maximally strong, then free weights are a better option. Just simply because with a push-up, after a certain point, yeah, you can put a big tire on your back, you can put stacked plates in your back, but after a certain point, there's only so much that you can carry, right? And you also don't have that stable base to push from, so usually the weak link becomes that the core is not strong enough to carry that amount of weight, and so you're not able to move it, right? Going back to the calisthenics thing, one thing that I forgot to leave in there is that you get a greater degree of stability work as well in the shoulders. After I'm doing, like, say pike push-ups, handstand push-ups, things like that, I feel almost more relaxed and, feel like that kind of good feeling you get after a workout, but through everywhere in the body, right? Versus maybe just feeling beat up in the shoulders after doing overhead presses. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about this and why I think it's a good idea to incorporate both body weight and free weight exercises into your routine is that I believe, in my personal experience, is that when you're doing free weight exercises, I feel like they hit the muscle fibers deeper, at a deeper level, and almost more intensely, more isolated than with a body weight exercise. So sometimes doing, and the other thing is too, if you're doing a body weight exercise and you are trying to get more volume in, right, but you're just too fatigued and you can't get more reps in, sometimes grabbing some dumbbells and doing some more reps, and that can increase your volume a little bit to a greater degree, whereas you maybe couldn't do that with the body weight exercises. That's just my opinion, and that's kind of what has worked for me in the past, and that's why I like to combine both the strength training and the body weight training so I get the best of both worlds, hopefully. Okay, so a word on deep breathing. You might have noticed, as in the previous clip, that I often will do deep breathing exercises after some of my sets of lifting, right? And the reason I do it is because it actually helps me to recover faster in between sets. The same thing as if you pace around rather than just sitting down or standing in between your sets, you're actually will recover faster in between your training sessions and be able to put out more work, right? And I actually would kind of naturally do this in the past simply because if you've been working at a very high rate for a while or exerting yourself heavily, when you're breathing hard, you don't want to just stop, right? At least for me, I feel like I'm going to explode or something, right? So it's almost like I have to walk around to kind of dissipate all that, that energy and stuff that's kind of, flowing out, or whatever, right? Now, a year ago, I was listening to a podcast with Andrew Huberman. He's a big guy in the science. He's got a lot of attention recently for his providing scientific based evidence for different health hacks and biohacking type things, right? And he's a ophthalmologist and neurologist, I believe, or neuroscientist at Stanford University, I believe is what it is. But anyway, in this podcast, he's talking about actually how they've actually found that when you do deep breathing exercises in between sets of your lifting in a workout, you actually do recover faster and it improves your performance. Now, you might have seen it in some other articles, and actually when I was doing some research online, it was easy. I was finding tons of information on all the benefits of doing breathing exercises after the workout or before the workout, but very little for intra-workout. So I thought that I would include that in there. That actually does help. Now, if you're not working out in your basement like I am, or at your own gym or something like that, or by yourself, you might feel a little bit self-conscious. Maybe you might even get kicked out of the gym if you start doing some of the breathing type stuff that I'm doing in my videos. However, you can, in between sets, just walk around and breathe deeply. Just be like, and I wouldn't do the super rapid rate of breathing like you do in the Wim Hof thing, right? Because that's actually supposed to ramp up your nervous system, right? I would actually do something that would be like fully in, maybe pause for a second, let it out slowly. And that helps to kind of cool the sympathetic nervous system activity slightly so that you recover a little bit faster. Alright guys, so here is the end of the video. A bit of a long video. Hopefully you found it somewhat entertaining though. You can fast forward through some of the training clips. A lot of it's not, rocket science and stuff. But to recap, what I was talking about is that, obviously you want to be starting off with this compound lifts. Choose accessory exercises or isolation exercises that utilize similar muscles and muscle groups that were used in the compound lifts, but to hit them more directly, right? Then, secondly, when you're working your back, you don't want to just work doing rowing exercises, flies, stuff like that, or pull-ups. You also want to be making sure that you're prioritizing your lower trapezius, whether that's through doing Y raises, scapular rowing, or doing front squats. And in fact, front squats are an excellent way to strengthen up your lower trapezius, especially if you're doing a heavy front squat. Now, with the front squat, you got to make sure that you have the requisite mobility to get your arms up underneath there and keep them there. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot harder. Some things that you can do to do that is to do a little bit of, trigger point massage for the lats, shoulder girdle and stuff like that. Also your upper back, and then stretching out the lats and working on that over time to make sure that you have that mobility. And that's another reason why you don't want to just be focusing on lat pull downs, pull-ups and stuff like that, because if you do, you're going to get those lats really tight, overdeveloped in relation to the lower traps, the rhomboids, and things like that. Okay, so the next thing I talked about was combining calisthenics or body weight exercises with free weight movements, and the reason for that was that I feel like the free weight exercises, many of them because you're in a more stable position and it doesn't require as much core strength, and so the core isn't like the limiting factor. You can move a lot more weight, so it's going to develop the muscles a little bit stronger, right? Because you're in an ideal position leverage-wise to move more weight. Also, if you're difference between doing chin-ups, and pull-ups for the biceps is, if you're doing that and then maybe doing a little bit lighter curls or something, I find that doing isolation work or free weight work for the biceps and even triceps and stuff tends to hit the muscle fibers a little bit more deeply than does just doing straight body weight exercises. But that's just been my experience. And lastly, breathing exercises. In between your sets, breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. And just, don't be afraid to breathe deeply. A lot of times, people that I'm training, they will be a little bit shy about, breathing heavily after they get done with a set or something like that. But you want to go with the flow. Otherwise, you're restricting the flow of energy in the body, and it's going to inhibit you in your next set. In fact, in different scientific studies, it actually shows that when you actually perform this deep breathing in between your sets, it enhances recovery and makes you stronger in subsequent sets. Alright guys, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. If you'd like to see more content related to workout design, whether for building muscle, losing body fat, also diet for building muscle, athletic performance, and losing body fat, or preventing injuries from coming up, and if you do sustain an injury, which is almost inevitable in the course of your training career, how to work around that injury so that you can get back to training as soon as possible. If any of that stuff sounds interesting to you, consider subscribing to the channel by hitting the button in the lower right hand corner of the screen, and we'll see you all next time.